Garden spots of the world. In military speak or mil speak, areas of conflict are sometimes called garden spots of the world. I'm still Pastor Larry Conway. I am still Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Joseph Conway, the 3rd U.S. Army retired. I am still a former instructor of the Army's Command and General Staff College, where I dealt with matters of faith and conflict. So, tonight, we have the one that we really added to the schedule because Iraq was so kind as to have a major meltdown. Or did it? Actually, ISIS has controlled Iraqi territory since December of last year. This didn't just happen out of the blue. It's just it made the news. And there was a dramatic push in terms of the amount of area that ISIS took. I want to thank Brian for the article. I didn't see this as of about 3 this afternoon, but this is as of 5 this afternoon. ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, and ISIL you'll sometimes see, the S is the word in Arabic. Anyway, they are now calling themselves the Islamic State. So instead of ISIS, I guess we should now start saying is. But for their behavior, I think I prefer Oz. Because they are rather strange. But thank you, Brian. We'll see what happens. But they formally declared their state. With their current guru or leader or Grand Poobah as the Caliph. Much as I've done in previous weeks, I just would like to go through some slides, just kind of give you an idea of the lay of the land, the geography a bit, get into the history, get into the cast of characters. There are a lot of them, and as always, questions, challenges, more than welcome. I may even answer one or two. Here is Iraq, outlined in green. Baghdad's the capital. It's that dot between just above the A and the Q. To the south of Baghdad is pretty much Shia territory, about 65% of the population. To the north and west is Sunni country, about 20%. And those two dots in the northeast, you are talking now Kurdish Iraq, about 15% of the population. There'll be other slides that'll show that a little clearer, but look at the neighbors: Iran, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and some of them are involved. There's a close-up. It looks like Kirkuk, but it's actually Kirkuk. That was the administrative capital of a province that was historically Sunni. Historically Kurdish. My mistake. In the time of Saddam Hussein, he basically drove the Kurds out, moved a lot of Arabs up there and said, this is now an Arab city. Well, with ISIS coming in and the Iraqi army abandoning Kirkuk, the Peshmerga, which is the very capable, I might add, Kurdish force, came in and occupied the city. And it basically said, we got it back. So even if after all this other settles, there's the issue of Kirkuk that is still simmering on the back burner. So if you hear battles around Kirkuk in the future after ISIS or IS or Oz or whatever is long gone, that's probably what's behind it. Samarra, Mosul, those are historically Sunni cities. Ar-Raqqa, that's an oasis. You get down in this area, heavier population. Again, this is Shia, Arab Shia. Do not think that they are Persian Shia. They are Arab Shia. They do not want to become part of Iran. There is an affinity. They look to Iran as a big brother. They'll gladly accept aid from Iran. They tend to see the world the same way. However, merger? They are Arabs who are Shia. That's part of the dynamic that's going on here. You've got Kurds in the north. They are Sunni. They are Kurdish Sunni. Just like their friends over here in Syria. Kurdish Sunni. And then you have in the center Arab Sunni. Three main ethnic groups, three main political groups. Okay. Oh, let's add our old friend desert. Very sparsely populated. No, I mean nothing as in not a building, not a blade of grass, sand, rock. That's it. A few oases. That's those desert areas. The Mojave is heavily populated in comparison. We don't have a part of the U.S. that's as barren as this, really. So, if you're talking about land in Iraq, or battles, or cities, or terrain, it's the white areas that you see. Euphrates Valley, Tigris, coming on down into the Delta region, historically the lands of the Marsh Arabs and the Shatt al-Arab, the waterway out to the Persian or Arabian Gulf, depending on who you talk to. Questions, comments? Okay. Ethnic religious groups. This is a struggle where religion is used as an identifier. The real issues behind the ethnic differences, it's ethnicity, it's cultural, it's who's going to be in charge, who's going to have the power, who's going to have control over our lives. But they identify each other by means of religion. It's not so much they differ in religion. I mean, you've got the Sunni and Sunni, and they're fighting. You've got Shia and Sunni. They both claim to be Muslim. And it says in the Quran that Muslims should never fight with one another. But it identifies you. So if you are Shia and you are Arab and you're with this group, if you're the green, mixed area, again, this is so sparsely populated. You know, 3 people go out in a Humvee. Okay, it's that ethnic group now. Sunni in through here. Again, this area very sparsely populated. And Sunni Kurds to the north. You can see how the lines over, you kind of merge there, areas of intermixing and mixed influence. Baghdad, yes, there are still 100 Jews left in the country. Maybe. Not sure. So we put them up there. Christians. Some in the south, minority group, was once 10% of the country. Now estimated to be less than 5%. There has been an exodus of Christians out of Iraq ever since the days of Saddam Hussein. Because he was doing things like up in Kirkuk saying, this is an Arab city, and threw the Kurds out. He was the one who was gassing the Kurds. You know, you may remember, we'll get to history. Up in here, historically, a higher proportion of Christians, still a minority population. Assyrian Christians. Syrian Christian Church, Chaldean Christian Church. One of them, I think it's Chaldeans, is communion with Rome. The Assyrian one is not. But again, massive population exoduses. One priest up there reported that he used to have 800 people on Sunday morning. He now has 300. And all the folks who left, it wasn't because they were mad at the pastor. They left the country. Yazidi is a religion and a minority group. Few spots up in the north, mainly over in Syria. Dealt with them a bit last week. Turkmen, Turkish ancestry. Little red dots in the north. Remember, this was run by the Ottoman Empire for many, many years. That's Turkey. So it was an empire based in Turkey that controlled Iraq for many, many centuries. So there's ethnic Turks that came down and lived there, and they're still there. They're now a persecuted minority, but they're there. Iranians. Remember, there's Iran. So you do have some Iranians in mostly Shia or mixed areas, but you do. But this one is right down here. So you're talking about mixed or dominated by Shia. Christian I've mentioned. Mandean, down here in the, there's some in Baghdad, but mainly down in the Delta Gulf area. It is the only one of the Gnostic religions to have survived to the modern age. And they tend to see the world a little differently. They would view themselves as another persecuted minority. It's about a gnosis, or a hidden knowledge. They would say that you are to read holy books strictly allegorically, and you look for the hidden meaning within, the gnosis, the knowledge. Their version of it is quite different from anybody else's. They claim to have the world's oldest religion, but there's no way to prove that. It may, however, be older than Christianity. Definitely is older than Islam. Probably older than Christianity. But they claim to be the world's oldest religion, and of course, they like their version of reality. Questions on this? Yeah.
When they say the prayers, the Shia versus the Sunni, do they sing it in the same language, or do they?
Yes.
So it's not, and do they give the same prayers?
If Sunni and Shia, it's the same, if I remember correctly, same prayers in Arabic, but there are some differences in prayer positions. If you get into Alawites over in the western part of Syria, well, they got a little differences. They say some things differently. And their statement of belief. In Islam, the statement of belief is, I believe there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. If you say that and believe it, you are a Muslim, according to Islam. That simple. Just think about that, folks who have gone through a confirmation class.
Before United States got mixed up in this, were they having all these problems? And we weren't just aware of it, or is that where?
We'll get there.
Oh, okay.
We'll get there. Yeah, they were having problems, but different kinds of problems might be the quick way of saying that. So, again, three main groups. Religion serving as an identifier. Here's where we stand today. I actually pulled this off the internet early last week. It hasn't changed. You may have heard reports that the Iraqi army has reconquered Tikrit, the homeland of Saddam Hussein. And, well, no they didn't. It is still contested. But the nearest Iraqi army forces are at least 2 miles out of town. And ISIS or Oz, or whatever you want to call them, is in charge of the city proper. What's going on? In Arab culture, in many Islamic societies, it is believed that everything that happens is God or Allah's will. Everything. That God has a book in the heavens, according to Islam, and everything that will ever happen is written in that book. And you can't change it. I can't change it. No one can. So, it's perfectly appropriate for the Iraqi army to declare victory before they attacked, because they were confident that God was going to give them the city. So they did. They came in from 4 directions, but they forgot about something called landmines. And that ISIS knows how to defend a city. These are well-trained insurgents. They know you don't just put a landmine here and just leave it out there, because then someone could dig it up or go around it or whatever. You put a landmine on the road so that when people stop to try to get rid of it, you shoot at them. So you slow them down. That's the purpose of a landmine. Stop the enemy so they're an easier target. Well, there was a battle, fairly bloody from what I've heard, and the Iraqi forces withdrew. At least that's what I heard as of this afternoon. But there are still reports from both sides saying we want a decisive victory. But of course, if Allah is on your side, that means you have to be successful. And I think that's the great Achilles heel of many of these societies. I mean, when the morning prayers are, come to the success, come to the success. What happens if you're perceived as not successful? That means God is not on your side. So if you're dealing with a conflict situation in the Middle East, by all means, you want the side you're opposing to look like they've failed. Because if they've failed, they have lost the blessing of God, and people will desert them in droves. Yes?
Now, if everything in Islam is preordained,
That's classic Islam, yeah.
okay, how do they deal with 2 different sects who have different perspectives on what God ordains? Which, you know...
Whoever is successful, it is obvious that that's the way Allah wanted it to happen. It's tied with success. So if you are successful, that means you got it right. You are not, that means you got it wrong.
I
Hey, Larry?
Yeah.
Like that example with the Iraqi pilots when they were...
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll give you two. First one. What was the name of that airline? TWA. TWA Flight 800 out of New York City for Egypt, a number of years ago. Crash landed, crashed into the ocean just off Long Island. The Egyptian government to this day claims it was malfunction of equipment. Westerners are pretty uniform in saying it was due to the co-pilot intentionally crashing the plane into the ocean. Now, the last thing they heard on a voice recorder in that cockpit before the plane took a dive was, "Inshallah," God willing. And the co-pilot was the only one in the cockpit at the time, and then that plane took a nosedive, straight into the water. Now, Fort Rucker, a few years later, back in the time when they were teaching helicopter pilots there, and there was an American trainer of a group of Saudis. And he's up there in a helicopter with this Saudi, as the Saudi pilot is trying to learn how to fly this crazy thing with pushing the feet. You know, you fly a helicopter kind of like you play a piano. You got to use your feet as well as your hands. And he was having trouble. He went, "Inshallah." And the American went, "Ah!" and grabbed the controls and wrestled it down. The Saudi was experiencing failure in his eyes of controlling that helicopter. Hence, it must be God's will that it is time to die. Inshallah. That's how strong this understanding is. So, decreed is still a claim by ISIS, or ISIL, or gosh, that's what we'll call them tomorrow. Kirkuk was outside of the Kurds area. It was controlled by the national government in Baghdad. However, Kirkuk is now controlled by the Kurdistan regional government. They just sort of redrew their border a little bit, which it was before Saddam Hussein's time, to be perfectly honest. They are also sheltering thousands of Sunnis who have fled ISIS and have moved up into this area. And they are sheltering Christian minorities. And the Peshmerga, well, if I had to fight them with equal equipment, I would not want to go up against them. They are tough customers, and they know what they're doing. I would say even more so than ISIS. Okay, again in the south, and you'll notice it says sparsely inhabited. Questions? Comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
If they see each other on the street, is there a way that they can visually observe what group they're in?
Yeah. If you're Shia or Sunni, yeah. Oh, which one is it? Sunni has the dot?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Sunnis press their forehead into the ground during the prayer, so you'll see a little impression.
Okay.
The Shia do not, so it won't be. Kurds, you'll tell by cultural differences, dress, use of language, things like that, because they'll use Kurdish. Although probably many know Arabic too. So there's a variety of cultural things, like how do you know the difference between European and American? You may not at first glance, but you can find out pretty quick. Same kind of thing. Yes?
Getting back to ISIS again and
Mhm.
his philosophy, how do the conservative imams, how are they dealing and reacting to this? Because this would be, like to us, the KKK re-emerging, and we just say, this is wrong.
Depends on who you talk to. The Shia clerics are condemning ISIS as a group of barbarians, monsters, horrible people. You know, they may actually be not that far off. Sunni reaction varies. Some are finally a successful jihadist group, because this land grab has been seen as a success. So there are parts of that 5% of Islam that gravitates in that direction, flocking now to ISIS, giving them more fighters, because it's seen as success. If you talk to the Sunni theologians in Cairo, they'd probably call them a bunch of crazies. You know, touched. Yes?
You know, they seem to play kind of fast and loose with what they call success. If you take the
Yes.
if you take the main drag through Heliopolis from the airport into Cairo, it's the fanciest street in Cairo and beautiful mansions and all this, and that's where they have their huge museum and monument to the huge success of the '73 war against Israel.
Yep. Which was stopped because Israel was counterattacking and about ready to take Cairo. But we'll forget about that part. The initial Arabs had, the Egyptians had initial success with U.S. resupply. Israel turned the tide in the Sinai, and by the time the war ended, it was pretty much a rout of the Egyptian forces due to air power. But yeah, they'll have this great monument to their success because you have to be seen as successful. So you'll see the truth be bent like a pretzel.
Well, remember Baghdad Bob?
Oh yeah, everybody remember Baghdad Bob? He was the Minister of Information for Saddam Hussein's government. He was the one saying, there are no Americans in Baghdad. When we were practically outside his building in downtown Baghdad. But he was saying, there are no Americans in Baghdad. Well, yeah. You almost call it wishful thinking, but remember, if Allah wills it, it will happen. So it doesn't depend on military strength or savvy or resupply or anything else or money. It depends on whether Allah has willed it or not. So you see these wild claims. Yeah.
Question of they believe is what Allah has written is what the Americans expect to bring them to succeed. I think.
Well, we train them in strictly military tactics. We train them on how to fight. But what we can never give them is the will to fight. Okay? What happened, well, I'll skip to it. What happened here was ISIS actually controlled Fallujah from December of 2013. Okay? They were in Ramadi, they were kicked out of Ramadi, but they held control of Fallujah until now, a couple of weeks ago, this massive push taking this light-colored area that you see. They had been preparing for that for some time. 6 government divisions disappeared. They ran away. Now, why? Keep in mind the fact that the Baghdad government was Shia. Pro-Shia with a Shia-first policy. The Maliki government was criticized over and over and over for treating their Sunni and Kurdish citizens as second-rate. And there are many examples of that. Stories of mistreatment by Baghdad security forces through this area in 2010, 2011. They're all over the place. So now, you are a Sunni soldier in the army of Baghdad. You're up here somewhere. There are a lot of them. ISIS comes attacking. You really hate this government. You really don't want to fight for them. So, inshallah, go put on civilian clothes. Switch sides. They're winning, so obviously God's on their side. There was no will to fight. You can train someone exceptionally well, but if they don't want to fight, or they don't believe in their cause, well, you see what happens. Yeah?
How long has ISIS been in existence, and where did they get these hordes of well-trained soldiers that our media doesn't seem to tell us where they came from?
Okay, let's back up. In 2005, when I was here, up here, briefly up in this area, and in this area for a little bit, flying in and out, it was called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. You may have heard that term. That was a Sunni insurgent group fighting U.S. and increasingly Iraqi government troops. The height of that insurgency was in 05-06. Afterwards, the U.S., what's his name? The General Petraeus. Petraeus use classic U.S. Army anti-insurgency doctrine that is about 100 years old. We did it in the Philippines in 1904. And essentially flipped the tribal leaders of the Sunni areas. The Sunni tribal leaders flipped them from anti-government to pro-government. How did we do it? We bribed them. We bribed them. We gave them money. We gave them resources. We supported them. We listened to them. And they flipped. Al-Qaeda in Iraq sort of fizzled out after that. Then we got a period of relative calm. The new Baghdad government comes in and immediately says, we're Shia, and starts repressing this group and this group. So fast forward about 2 years of repression, and suddenly, lo and behold, Al-Qaeda in Iraq has now reemerged as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or Syria, ISIS. And they are well trained. They were well trained from the fight in 05-06. They still had some cadres left. They had tribal leaders who had been involved in that civil war on both sides, who now flipped again against the government because of how the government treated them. And they'll be the first to tell you that. And ISIS is gathering strength. They're fighting an insurgency in Syria, in this area. They're doing fairly well, so they're getting a measure of success. They loot they briefly were in charge of Aleppo. They looted Aleppo, got about $2 billion out of that one, mainly in gold. So, $2 billion buys you a lot of jihad. They've also been receiving a lot of contributions from wealthy Saudi Arabians and Qataris. Officially, their governments claim that they are not supporting ISIS. Unofficially, nobody believes them.
Does funding come from the people in the United States? Do they?
Very little.
Very
There
little?
may be a few jihadi groups, individuals here who support jihad. And I can assure you that CIA and FBI know who they are. That's very, very little. The vast majority of ISIS funding from outside the areas they have conquered is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Gulf states.
Well then, Qatar, the Gulf states, and Saudi Arabia have to be aware of how the rest of the world views them in terms of their supporting this.
Yes, that's why they officially claim that they don't.
See, it's individuals, it's not the government itself.
That's their line. That's their story and they're sticking to it, but nobody else believes them. You'll see it quite a bit in various articles about the Saudis. Go back a bit. About the Saudis, Qataris, UAE, various, in smaller amounts, some other Arab countries supporting ISIS. And since we're kind of I'm going to this is their stated aim. Since we're dealing with ISIS right now, I'm just going to skip ahead a bit. This is obviously from an Islamic website. And you read it this way, like Hebrew. Goes in the other direction. I put in some English words. Those are proposed administrative divisions in the blue of what would be what they're now calling the Islamic State. Note that Alawite, Shia, a little bit of Syria, they say they won't want that. The Druze in the very bottom here, Golan Heights, they don't want that. They're saying they don't want the Shia part of Iraq. They say this is as far as we're going and no further. Kurds can have their own country. This has a lot of appeal in that part of the world. For the Kurds, the dream of Kurdistan has been around for 3,000 years. They've never had it.
Well, I guess
Ethnic group without a country. Never has had its own country.
So they have enough external support, even if they are shunned by the rest of the world, to
Currently?
exist as there.
Yes. Now,
In the
conquest is one thing. Developing a state is another. I would argue that ISIS is a group of barbarians.
Yeah.
Barbarians are very good at conquering and destroying. They're not very good at building up an economy, or a favorable trade balance, or giving any measure of peace and prosperity to its citizens. Yeah.
I just heard